That is so gross. It looks like a cat's bum. My lips look like a cat's bum. So I have got so many requests that I need to get through, and I don't want to let you guys down, so I'm having like a little marathon of stuff, and I'm just going to try and get as many videos out there as I possibly can. So the one I wanted to do today is how to pass an exam. This is not 100% fact, okay, because if you don't study, you're not going to pass. But these are little revision tips that I used when I was at university and when I was at school. You know, it got me through my exams. So I wouldn't say like I aced everything, but I did all right. So I got through, I passed them. And I've got a list of tips on how you can pass an exam. But some of them are to do with general things that you should do in the year, like to prepare yourself for exam time. So number one, in my opinion, you should always revise with somebody. And I don't mean like every single bit of your revision needs to be with somebody else, but especially for topics that you might need to explain or topics that are a little bit harder, it's quite a good idea for you to explain things to each other so that if one person doesn't understand and the other person does understand, that person can explain it to you and you can do the same thing for them. And I find that if you talk out loud and you try and explain something to somebody else, it then becomes a little bit clearer in your head. So when I was at university, I revised with my friends all the time, and we used to sit in a room, have bullet points in our head, and we used to read them back and forth to each other, make up stupid stories so that we could remember stuff. And I found that that was a really, really good way of actually getting through an exam. Also, if you don't understand something, please go and ask your lecturers, please go and ask your teachers. That is what they're paid to do, and it is their reputation on the line if you don't pass one of your exams. So they obviously want you to pass your exams. So you need to ask for help if there's something that you really don't get. You really need to ask for help. I always used to, when I was revising at home for like my degree exams, like what I used to do, I had an exam that was all about eye diseases and cataracts and things like that. So I used to explain everything to my dad. And I used to pretend that he was the patient, and I used to have to pretend that I was telling him that he had a cataract, and then he would ask me loads of questions like, how do they remove cataract, and how do they do this, and how do they do that? And I had to learn all the answers. Like, you need to understand it so well that you can just explain it to somebody else. So I would get my dad to test me on questions, get somebody to ask you questions like back and forth, because that is something that will be a lot easier for you to remember. Because if you've been asked a question and you didn't know the answer and someone goes, actually the answer is this, you're not likely to forget the answer again if you've got it wrong already. So I say get a family member or something to ask you questions and then just respond. And if you get the answer wrong, then obviously they can tell you what the correct answer was. So what I used to do first, my mum and dad used to think that I spent a lot of time just wasting my time writing. But what I actually used to do is read something through, try and remember as many points as I could, and then the bits that I forgot I would condense into like separate bullet points. So I would always like read a paragraph, try and explain it to somebody else, and if I've forgotten the bits, so if I've kept forgetting the same bits over and over again, I would then write those on a separate bullet point, and I would just keep going over the points that I forgot. Because if you, like I said, if you forget something once and someone corrects you, you're probably not going to forget it like the second time round. So it's just a lot easier if you do it wrong a couple of times to then like remember stuff. So I think use bullet points rather than write everything out in paragraphs, because it's a lot easier to see and it's a lot easier to just see in front of you and condense everything. So try and condense things into bullet points. Try and use highlighters for things that you don't really easily remember, especially when you're at school or at university and you're going through your notes. If there's something that you're not sure about, circle it or star it when you're actually in the lecture, because it's something that you'll remember to come home and like learn about or revise or just go over again. And also, if there are certain specific things that are really, really important to remember and you've got your notes, just make sure you have a highlighter with you in all your classes and all your lessons, and use a highlighter to go through stuff that the teacher says are really important things or tips to remember, or certain lessons if you're thinking, oh, that's a bit complicated, I don't think I'll remember that. Just highlight things that you need to, because it's just a lot easier when you come back to revising through your notes. You can go, I've highlighted that, it must be really important. I would say also make some sort of timetable so you've got enough time to actually revise everything. So say for example you're revising biology and you've got 10 subjects to get through, leave yourself plenty of time to actually revise, because if you don't have the time to revise, you're not going to fit these 10 subjects into like one day. So what you need to do is go, right, biology, this week I'm going to study this. next week I'm going to study this, I'm going to get through this topic. Make sure you've got like a 10-week plan leading up to like the end of your exam day, so that you know exactly what topic you need to revise each day. Therefore, you've got enough time to fit everything in. If you're feeling great and something's like a really easy topic, then maybe you can start on the next topic like a week early and then just be a little bit ahead of schedule. But always make sure you've got enough time. The timetable is the most tedious thing to write out, but it is the most useful tool that you're ever going to have. So if you've got exam revision timetable, when you get home, write in your homework diary for your homework, revise this topic of this section. And so that when you come closer to the exam time, you don't have like 100 things to revise. You've just got to try and remember those really important points again. During the year, make sure your notes are always in order. So go to all of your lectures, go to all of your lessons. Have a folder for each subject. This is what I did when I went to my A-levels and I went to university. I had like 4 or 5 different subjects in my degree and when I was doing my A-levels. So I would always say have an individual folder for each subject or each topic or each section. And when you go to that specific lecture, like make sure you take the right folder so that when you go through your notes, everything is in chronological order of when you learnt it. Because obviously normally what they do is they start with the easy stuff first and then the year gets harder and harder and harder as you get to more complicated stuff. So if all your notes are in the right order as you go along, you're going to start with the easy stuff and then you can kind of learn the easy stuff and then the harder stuff doesn't seem so hard once you've learnt all the easy stuff. Whereas if you put all your notes the wrong way around, you're not going to know what to revise first and it's just going to look like a complete mess. The other thing is like when you're revising, make sure you don't tire yourself out. Like don't revise until you fall asleep. Have designated times like after work, maybe before you have dinner to revise one topic and then for an hour afterwards maybe revise for another topic. Realistically, you can only concentrate for like 40-minute intervals at a time, which is why at school all my lessons were like 40 minutes and then might get like a 10-minute break in between each lesson, so I had time to go to lessons. So don't do anything for more than 40 minutes at a time without having a break, because otherwise you'll find that you can't concentrate that much. Don't be hungry or be thirsty or be dehydrated before you sit down to revise, because nothing's going to go into your brain if you're hungry or thirsty. So make sure you're fed, make sure you're like watered, and then sit down to do revision. And have a timetable or an alarm so you can go, right, I've had enough time on this subject, I need to go on to the next subject. Just make sure you plan everything out really, really easily. Don't cram until I say this, but I never stick to this because I always crammed at the last minute. The thing is, you need to sleep before an exam. Like you really do need to sleep before an exam. I was one of those nocturnal people that would kind of just sleep extra during the day so that I could revise all the way up until my exam. So generally I studied the whole night and then I went straight to my exam and then I came back and slept. That was just the way that I worked better because I found there were less distractions at night. Some people don't work like that. Some people need to get up really early, start revising really early, and then have a couple of hours before they go to their exam and then come back and do whatever they need to do. But I always found that I just revised straight up to my exam. Don't tire yourself out. Don't do what I did, because it was probably the worst thing to do, is to go into an exam 6 hours after I'd been revising for it. Make sure you get a good night's sleep and try and relax yourself for a good half an hour before you go to sleep. So have some music on, have a bath, have some pudding, I don't know, do something where you're not stressing about the revision, because if you go to bed and you're still thinking about your revision, your brain is not going to get a chance to rest because you're going to be really stressed out. So if you can, relax for a little bit of time before you actually go to sleep so that your brain is calm, your brain is not active, and you can have a proper actual rest. Try and go to all of your lectures, try and attend every single lecture that you have, and make sure that if you miss any classes, you go back to the individual teacher or you go back to one of your friends, you borrow their notes, you go through everything, and make sure you don't miss out on vital notes from each lesson. So if you weren't well one day, go to the teacher the next day and say, look, I wasn't well yesterday, but I really like the notes for this class. And there might be some feedback or something they can give you. They might ask you to go and speak to one of your colleagues, but make sure you get that stuff back, because if that's one lecture and that comes up in your exam, you're going to be absolutely really just annoyed with yourself that you weren't a little bit more organised. I don't really have much more than that and my most important things and the things that got me through my exam are revising with somebody, highlighting my notes, explaining everything out loud. I generally find that talking out loud and explaining it to somebody else was a much better way for me to actually remember stuff. Keep your notes in check. Make sure you're organised with your notes. Write down as many notes in your lectures as you can as you're going along, because If you don't, you're just going to struggle when you look back at your notes and everything's like empty. And also, if you have exercises to do and then the teacher marks them, always correct your answers so that you know where you made a mistake. Or if you don't understand where the teacher's got an answer from, then just explain them, because if you've got the wrong information in your notes because you got the answer wrong, you're going to revise it all wrong. So just make sure everything's up to date in your notes, make sure you've got the correct answers, and make sure you understand what is in your folder. And do a little bit of revision like every day leading up to your exams so that you don't have to cram in as much information. I really hope this is helpful. I know it's a bit rambly because I think with exam stuff, everybody does things in their own way. I used to have like a hot drink with me, and I used to have like a little bit of music on sometimes. In my breaks, I would go downstairs, I would like eat something, and then I would come back upstairs and start revising the next topic. Just make sure you've got time to do everything. So I think the biggest thing with exams is not that we don't have the brain capacity to revise, it's just that we haven't left ourselves enough time. So I hope this was helpful, and you can use this with regards to university, you can use this with regards to A-levels or GCSEs, because you've got your different subjects. Just have a folder for each subject and just make sure you're really organised, and you will be absolutely fine. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and please share this if you think it will actually help anybody. Bye.